Hello and welcome, my friends and viewers, to this week's episode of Legendlore, where I draw and talk about monsters, characters, gods, and other things from Dungeons & Dragons, all while giving a small but quickly indigestible history about them. Together we'll go over their history within the game, how they're utilized in the modern edition, and how you guys can utilize them in your own games. Today we're going to be covering the toad-shaped avatars of pure chaos, simply known as the Slaad, or Slaadi for plural. Getting right into it, Slaad resembled large bipedal frog-like creatures with sharp talons, teeth, and prominent heads that made up most of their body. They were also known to assume all sorts of different sizes and colors, which often denoted rank and strength, as well as differing biological additions ranging from hair to blade-like claws or scales, and even horns or tentacles. It is also believed that inside of the Slaadi's skull, rather than a brain, is a large crystal carved with eldritch runes, matching the Slaadi in color and said to denote its true nature and its powers. I like to imagine it to be similar to how Pennywise from Stephen King's Its true form is a trio of lights, even though he appears the majority of the time in the form of a clown. In terms of their abilities, on top of possessing immense physical strength, Slaadi could also summon other Slaadi with varying levels of success, an ability that they kind of share with devils and demons, with its reliability often being based on the Slaad's own power level. Thus, I would imagine that a magic-wielding Slaad would have a much better time doing so. Slaadi were also known to have a healing factor that was so strong that its activation was quick enough to be visible to the naked eye, as well as being capable of healing them from mortal wounds and even regenerating body parts, which included their own heads. Slaadi were also resistant to all forms of acid, cold, electricity, and fire damage, while also being immune to thunder damage. I can actually imagine this being depicted as their chaotic forms literally splitting apart or funneling like jello upon being hit by said damage before reforming back into their solid state, giving your players a bit of cosmic horror for whenever they face them. Slaadi were also very much known to develop individual mutations that range from being able to use breath weapons, to having petrifying gazes or toxic cysts that burst upon contact, as well as control over magic and use of the chaos matter that they themselves were composed of. We'll get into more detail about chaos matter in a moment, but this ultimately offered the Slaadi the ability to not only swim, breathe, and wield chaos matter in a way that would literally kill any other mortal who attempted to do the same, but they could also use it to spawn new and spontaneous terrain or matter on a whim, which from a combat standpoint would be very useful and allow them to conjure cover, bridges, walls, and any other sort of geography in pursuit of outflanking and defeating the party. Slaadi were also even known to use chaos matter to create plane-traveling ships, which allowed them to be able to draw on it while they were out voyaging in other planes. They could also manifest it as armor, weapons, resources, and pretty much anything that they needed for their multiplanar conquests. There's also belief that the prolonged presence of a Slaad within a plane that's different than the one that they come from, which is Limbo, that it can literally cause reality itself to begin to dissolve, break down, and become malleable before eventually turning into its raw chaos matter form. Now, in terms of Slaad culture, being the native inhabitants of the ever-changing chaos of Limbo within the Forgotten Realms canon, they were creatures of pure chaos, and thus were often not subject to logic, rationality, or even the laws of physics themselves, at least as we know them. Making deals or engaging in diplomacy was often very difficult due to many Slaadi not even knowing their own methods for engaging in such behavior, which resulted in often maddening and frustrating encounters with them. A Slaadi was just as likely to see an insult as an attempt at bargaining, or a pledge and promise as a great insult. It was ultimately impossible to speak their language or understand their culture because it, like them, was embodied entirely in chaos and insanity. The only concise law that Slaadi seemed to abide by was the law of strength, in that the stronger Slaad ruled over the weaker ones, and were always keen to take what they needed from those that they could, be it other Slaadi or otherwise. They were also distinctly interested in the deconstruction of stable reality and the spread of chaos, believing that to assume one form and one belief was to be imprisoned. Their societies, quote-unquote, were often found to be roving nomadic clans who traveled across the planes of existence, introducing chaos and madness to everything that they touched. Beyond that, as I mentioned before, Slaadi were sort of beholden to a ranking caste system, with the red and blue Slaadi being the lowest, the green and gray Slaadi being at the middle, and the all-powerful death, white, and black Slaadi being at the top. This is a belief that I sort of kind of disagree with, since it imposes order upon an innately chaotic race, but I'll get more into detail on that later. Slaadi were also believed to worship an enigmatic eldritch group of entities known as Slaad Lords, who were said to be equivalent in power to things like demon lords, archdevils, paragons, celestials, and so on. They essentially functioned as the rulers of Limbo in the same way that the devils and demons rule over the hells and the abyss respectively. In terms of their origins, Slaadi were known to collect and be conjured from a massive floating island made out of chaos matter known as the Spawning Stone. And were even known to have mating seasons in which the stone generates rampant and volatile chaos energy, which then feeds back into the planes of limbo in a sort of self-powering cycle. The Spawning Stone was capable of manifesting Slaadi on its own, almost like a sort of 3D printer but for chaos. An epic level campaign could be centered around attempting to find and destroy the Spawning Stone to end the Slaadi scourge forever. With this in mind, I actually find the Slaadi's alternate way of reproduction to be a bit more interesting and terrifying when placed on the players as a form of consequence. What I mean by this is when red and blue Slaads affect other non-Slaadi creatures with something known as the Chaos Phage, it functions similarly to a parasite where the victim either has Slaadi eggs placed under their skin or are affected by a disease that painfully transmutes them into Slaadi over time, leaving no trace of their former self and personality, but possibly leaving behind their skills, which can then guide what type of Slaad they end up becoming. With this in mind, in terms of running Slaadi in combat, their stat blocks are actually pretty solid in terms of adding excitement to the battle via having better failure states other than just death by HP loss. Strikes from Slaadi, depending on the type, can cause the struck PC to become a Slaad if left untreated. So if you want to present a conundrum to players who don't have access to high-level spells like Remove Curse yet, deploy a Slaad and have them impart the curse upon the PC, and then require them to seek out an NPC or item that has the ability to remove the curse, and thus free them from becoming an Agent of Chaos. With that in mind, also understand that this has the potential to cause delayed and slow degradation of a PC's mind and body when afflicted by the curse, which can make for some interesting roleplay as a sort of extended failure state. Slaadi were also one of the few monster types that actually do fight to the death, as when they are killed on any other plane besides Limbo, they just dissipate and respawn back perfectly fine. So feel free to have them swarm and kamikaze themselves, and one of my favorite recommendations is to have a Slaadi mage cast spells like Fireball or Hunger of Hadar on themselves. Or if you want something that is much more chaotic, but very in line with classic D&D, you could have them take a bag of holding and a portable hole, place one inside the other, and cause an interplanar black hole to suck them and the other players into it. When running Slaadi, you always want to think, what is the most chaotic and wildest thing that I can do? And I like to incorporate a variety of different effects into my Slaadi in the pursuit of this goal, namely using the Wild Magic Surge table as a key point of inspiration, especially when Slaadi manage to make a critical hit on an attack. With that said, when it comes to me and running Slaadi at the table, I will tell you all this right now, I actually dislike the way that the Slaadi are presented right out of the gate. They're sort of depicted as little more than frog barbarians who travel the plains in search of fucking things up and proving themselves to be the strongest. And at that point, they just become sort of like astral bullywugs. With that said, after being exposed to such excellent masters of chaos such as Pathfinder's Proteans or MCDM's Court of All Flesh, I personally think that we can do better than what we have. As such, when I run Slaad in my games, while I do keep their frog and toad-based forms as their defaults, this small, simple shape is only assumed by them to conserve energy and seem not threatening to their opponents. However, when it comes time for pursuit and combat, my Slaadi in my world are actually capable of completely transmuting and changing any part of their body, similar to the parasites from the anime Parasite the Maxim. They are basically elementals of chaos, and thus their bodies are ever-changing and ever-versatile, capable of changing their limbs into weapons made out of flesh, bone, and other bioorganic material, as exemplified by the picture I'm currently drawing. They can literally make throwing knives from their nails, they can elongate their arms as a sort of whip or chain or sword, and they can even shift their mouth down to their stomach to make it significantly bigger in order to be able to devour larger size opponents. Not only that, but they can change their body parts into different organs or shapes, providing themselves with wings, gills, secondary breathing organs, tails, or climbing claws. And this means that no matter what environment you are in, the Slaadi can and will follow you. So much so that if the PCs manage to lose them, and several sessions go by without any other issues, the Slaad can suddenly appear just at the right time, almost like a sort of astral Jason Voorhees, showing up at inopportune moments such as when the PCs are about to take on a powerful boss, or when they find a particularly important MacGuffin that the Slaad just happens to show up and thieve away with. With all this in mind, I've actually included a version of my own Slaad in the description below, with a couple of different variations to help stoke combat and make the situation a little bit more varied, such as the Winged Hunter Slaad, the Martial Slayer Slaad, the Tanking Beast Slaad, and my personal favorite, the Mage Slaad. With that in mind, here are a couple of magic items that I personally believe would match very well with Slaad and Slaad-based loot. And for our homebrew magic item this evening, we have the Slaad Arm, which is a +1 glove that requires attunement by a creature with a chaotic alignment. This means chaotic good, chaotic evil, or chaotic neutral. While attuned, the arm can turn to any weapon at will as a bonus action on the wielder's turn, and they cannot be disarmed of this weapon in any way as it fuses to their flesh. When you roll a natural 1 with this item, the Slaad arm rips from your grip and transforms into a Slaad, at which point you can roll on the following chart to decide which Slaad it becomes. If you manage to defeat the Slaad and reduce it to 0 hit points, it transforms back into the Slaad arm and gains a permanent +1 bonus to its attack and damage rolls, which can go up to a maximum of +5, rather than just the traditional +3 for 5th edition. If a lawful or neutral creature attempts to attune to the arm consumes them and turns them into a Slaad for 24 hours, rolling on the chart to decide which Slaad they become. When the time passes, they then transform back into their normal selves with 1 hit point. I've included the item stat block in the description below. And with that, that's our coverage of the Slaad, everybody. I want to thank all of you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and press the little bell icon to be notified of future videos. If you guys want a chance to vote on future content that comes to the channel, please check out the community tab. And you can also find all the stat blocks for the creatures, the magic items, and this video in script form on my Substack, which is also linked in the description. DMs, I want to know how you guys like to deploy, change, or modify Slaad for your games, and players, I want to know how you guys encountered Slaads and defeated them over the course of your adventures, as well as what you guys would like to see in upcoming videos. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.